Welcome back to the fifth podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alicia James, and my co-host.
Hey, it's Marcus Hodges. Welcome back, and we are excited to have Maggie Morales, director in El Paso, Texas.
Yes.
Who is a thought leader, who is an advocate for reform, who is just a phenomenal leader. And I'm just welcome, Maggie. Glad to be here. So can you introduce yourselves to our audience and tell us about all the great things that you do?
Well, I don't know about all great, but good morning, everyone. My name is Magdalena Morales. I am the director for the Community Supervision and Corrections Department, also known as the Adult Probation here in El Paso. I have been a practitioner for probably May it'll be 26 years. I started off as a probation officer, specializing in working with justice-involved individuals with behavioral health conditions. So people who had psychiatric conditions, and it's something that was just it grew for me to enjoy it so much that I pursued advanced education and became a licensed therapist, just so I could, have input in the game. I did that for 17 years. And in 2011, I was appointed as the first Hispanic, that's what the general term is, female. There's only been two other directors in El Paso, and they were both white men. So when I came along, it was not an easy subject, and I know we'll get to that later. So what we were talking about earlier before we started recording is a Hispanic. That's a general term for classification for folks who speak Spanish or are from certain regions of the world. I'm a Chicana. I was born in East LA. I was a social justice advocate, and before it had a name, I just knew that it wasn't about living in the projects, it's about how people were treated. Yeah. And that's something that was instilled in me. My father immigrated from Mexico. My parents did. They had second, third grade education, but what my dad knew how to do was box. He knew how to fight. So, we talk about, and I think I shared this with Marcus, that I am a workaholic because that's part of my traumas. My dad would always lose his job. He would find work and then he'd lose it. And it wasn't because he wasn't a good worker. It's because he stood up for himself.
That's right.
Unfortunately, he stood up for himself with his fist. Somebody tried to oppress him and he responded with his fist, which was not a good idea. So to me, that was something it's important to work, and you have to work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Because I knew I saw the reaction with my mother, and what are we going to do? But my dad was a hustler. That's the other part, is that he's like, I'll be back. Oh, the lights went out. I'll be back, and stuff. So that was something else that I did see. And it was, I think, exemplified in how he responded to issues. Because there was always issues. When you're in an environment where everybody else is along with you in the experiences of what it means to be poor, or what it means to live in an environment where not even the police department will go in there unless it's daylight and you got backup, you know that you have to be able to not only rely on yourselves, but rely on those who are close to you. So this is where a lot of community activism and so forth came along, and when I was talking to Marcus, I was telling him that I was listening to Barack Obama talk about his early days in activism, in community reform. And it all begins with us and our experiences. And I believe, and I strongly believe now, 26 years in the game, 52 years in this life, that there's no equity, so there's never going to be an even playing field where people get to live their lives that we can say, oh, I understand you. No, you don't, until you walk in somebody's shoes who hasn't had opportunities. I am blessed, and I'll say blessed because the universe has responded in ways that have afforded me opportunities without having the privileges to begin with. I was in and out of the justice system as a young girl, but a lot of it was just survival, which is what I see in a lot of my clients, So I learned that, we talk about right now, there's this big movement in Texas about raising the age, right? In Texas, a child is a child only until the age of 16. At 17, they go to adult jails.
That's right.
We have a lot of young men and women who are entering our criminal justice system who are still kids, So for a lot of them, trying to uh, develop and to promote awareness of the importance of understanding, in order for us to be effective, we have to understand who our population is.
Yeah.
And in order for us to do that, we have to know more than this program is this program. Because historically, the tail 'em, nail 'em, and jail 'em, one size fits all, it does not work.
It doesn't work.
It-
And
You
we've
know?
seen that. We've seen that year and year, time and time before. And we in this change, we have to do something because we know it doesn't work. I'm gonna put a pause right here. This is a pause for Des. Give me 2 seconds. I'm running low on battery and didn't
Okay.
realize that this cord is not working. So
Okay.
we're gonna pause right there. Get your question locked and loaded, Marcus.
I already have it.
What's your question? Second.
Then what I'm gonna go? Well, I'm gonna say that I heard that you were a pioneer in the role of activism. So right now, the whole notion of criminal justice transformation, what does that mean, and how can we empower practitioners to get in line with transformation?
I did a
You
presentation.
can answer now. Hold that thought. That's your question coming up when we get back on.
Oh, well, and I wanted to tell you, I don't know if it's sharing or caring time, but I wanted to show you what I did. So I presented at the leadership conference for APPA, and that's what I believe is we have to be able to, transformation is about empowering, about teaching, about bringing awareness to the practitioners that are coming into the field. That's the only way.
You better remember that when we get back on.
Okay.
That's exactly what I want you to say.
Okay.
We back in?
We're going back in 3, 2, 1.
Maggie, I tell you what, I love your experience about activism. I love the work that you were a pioneer.
Yeah.
But here's the question for you. We're in this age now of criminal justice transformation, of transforming the criminal justice systems. We have the data. We know that there are parts that we're doing very well, but there are parts that we're not doing well. And this whole fifth podcast is about empowering practitioners to get behind transformation. So what can practitioners do?
I believe that there's different levels, being active in voting, which I'm not even going to get into Georgia right now, but being active in what helps change laws, what helps bring awareness, being supportive of our elected officials that believe in what we believe in, which is transformation. But I think at our level, if it's at the micro level that you want to consider it, I believe that it's getting involved in organizations that support what it means to have what's called justice transformation. For example, I've taught at different leadership institutes for criminal justice professionals, and I talk about how important it is to understand what criminal justice reform means, educating it at that level, because now you're dealing with a practitioner who's face to face, who's in the field, who's out in the field working with individuals and teaching them how it's different to teach people just by treating them with dignity and respect. The impact that it has. I always cite when I do presentations in whether it be leadership academies or trauma-informed care, I do a lot of consulting with different organizations, because to me, it's important that we spread the word. It's like gospel. You have to spread the word and the knowledge. And for some folks, how does it save money? That's what we usually have to do to implement certain programs. But I always talk about the root of transformation is how we see ourselves in the field, how we treat the people.
That's the word. Yeah.
Yes.
And Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel.
That's right.
You can motivate and inspire somebody about how different life would be if they followed this path, whether it be terms and conditions or probation, recovery, education, whatever the case may be. We have better results than being coercive and forceful and directive. It's about relationships. When we cultivate relationships, professional relationships with the clients that we serve, what's in a name? I was in a meeting a couple of days ago where the perspective is there, where it's criminal justice reform, but they kept using the word offender. I said, I'm just going to start here, Judge. I don't like that word. I said, a lot is in the name. And if we're trying to develop this as an academy, as a leadership academy, as identifying early diversion candidates to get them and move them out of the criminal justice system, I said that we need to have something that's better. I said, justice involved individuals, formerly incarcerated clients. I call them my clients. I said, because for a lot of folks, that in itself, that label, the self-fulfilling prophecy. I said, so for me, it's important that we teach criminal justice practitioners that we treat people with dignity and respect.
You know, that is so important. That's so important, Maggie. I mean, just I had to jump in there because it's, you know, I remember early in my career, it was like offender, it was, you know what I'm saying? It was MA, it was these titles. And I think that we intended to do well as practitioners. And I think sometimes that often is the intent. The intent to do well is there. The lack of knowledge or the lack of self-awareness because of the cultures of, you know, the academy or what is accepted in these environments, then that is kind of, you know, put on the forefront. And then for a new person coming in, they want to acclimate to the environment. And so I think being cognizant, having boots on the ground, be cognizant, having leadership, be cognizant. Let's even go so far to change the titles of what we call individuals who are justice involved, if it's clients, justice involved individuals, et cetera. Let's change policy to reflect that, right? Like I think that I've seen some agencies go that far and be that intentional with it. And I think that is huge. You mentioned trauma-informed care.
Yes.
Trauma-informed care was something that was newly introduced to me several years back, but it was not, you know, 17, 20 years ago. It wasn't much talked about, at least in the criminal justice arenas, the traditional criminal justice arenas that I was a part of. Can you tell our audience, like, what is trauma-informed care? What is your role in that?
So I do work with SAMHSA, which is a Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and the Gain Center. And they have justice transformation. There is a movement. And part of that is trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
So I had a grant about 10 years ago where I got to go to DC and watch the videos of other folks and getting trauma-informed care trained. So of course, I said, you know, these are great videos, but it didn't speak to my people. Yeah. It didn't speak to the people that I represent.
It didn't speak to my people. Wait, can we just pause? I'm sorry, like it didn't speak to my people. And you know, Marcus, we talk about like culture and having the correct people in the correct seats. Having the correct people in the correct seats to lead that change. But when you think about that, like you identified that as a leader to say, you know what, this is not talking to the population that you are trying to serve. Okay, I'm sorry. Had to highlight that. Go ahead. Keep going.
That's exactly it. So a few months down the road, I get a call and it's like, put your money where your mouth is. So back in probably 2004, I had a young man, you know, typical victim of just a historical trauma. Mother had him at 14. She had a serious mental health conditions, abused him. He ended up in the juvenile justice system from the age of 10, was released on a 9-month sentence to the age of almost 18. So a lot of trauma there. So he assaulted me in my office. And that was something that I shared, because for me, it was like, oh, you have to be out. It was a whole family thing. My husband's like, you have to leave the field. I'm like, this is what I do. So at the end of the day, I ended up going back, you know, and this is all in a video. I ended up going back to work and I started working toward what do I need to do different? So it wasn't what I was doing, is I had to advocate for clients like him who weren't getting the services that they needed. You know, right. So it wasn't about having bars and putting them that way. I still get to treat my client with dignity and respect. And as a matter of fact, you know, I went and I testified and I said, he needs a hospitalization. He doesn't need to go to prison. So I dismissed, I asked him to dismiss the charges. So people think that I'm crazy because I believe to that degree. And it's not that I'm trying to be any kind of martyr, but I think it brings awareness to say, it's not the fact that I'm not holding the person accountable. It's the fact that that person was in complete psychosis because of the lack of services that he needed. He didn't get adequate care, which resulted in him acting, which is a lot of what happens. You know, de facto, a lot of our prisons have become the mental health authority because that's where people who don't fit in somewhere end up. You know, so with that, what I shared that story in during our conversations and being trained, because it was facilitator training. So they asked me, can we put you on video? We need more awareness about individuals who are in the field, who have experienced trauma, and what do you believe to be important? So we talked about, so in Trauma with Samson, the Gain Center, it's called How Being Trauma Informed Improves Criminal Justice Responses. And basically it's a 4-hour training, and the principles are the 3 E's. It's the event, the experience, and the effect. So you have not only a criminal justice practitioner, you have another officer, Officer Tully, my interview, and it's broken down so people understand how it impacts. But it also has videos of formerly incarcerated, individuals who are in recovery, who have gone on with their lives and become nurses and become professionals, and how people who they encountered during the time that they were, still using drugs or still not properly medicated and became just as involved, had compassion and understood that this person needs treatment and not prison. And what that did is it was diversion and it was an intervention. But in order for us to be able to change the game, we have to bring awareness, which is what happened with me. I was coming here from East LA. It was a different world, different accent, different world, in the sense of poverty is poverty.
Yes.
But there was people who saw in me what I probably didn't see for myself. I knew I was an activist. I knew that equality was important. I just didn't know how to put it into perspective. So I was, I was expelled and stuff like that. So I had this counselor who kept calling me into his office, and he says, I think I see your scores and they're high. I believe that if you stay in school, you can become something. And I said, we're poor. I gotta help my family. I gotta work. So he's like, what if I help you get a job? So this man, elderly white man, because he was, I think he's the only person who would probably agree to work in that school, said, Mr. Johnson, and he said he found me a job during it's called the Private Industry Council, and they hired a bunch of poor kids, introduced them to industry, right? Which it worked. So I went into that program and I came back. That summer, the money that I earned, I had buy clothes for my younger sisters. I paid a bill or two. It was just a struggling family, but it helped. So with that, when I came back to school, I said, okay, now I got to quit school because I like working, right? He taught me industry and how I can bring about change in my own family. So he got it to where I went to school part-time and I worked part-time. All I had to do was get an A or a B or above. So I'm like, that's easy. And that's what it did. That intervention kept me, I graduated from high school, but remember, I had been expelled like 3 times, right?
The fighting, right? I bet you it was fighting.
Let me tell you, it's not fighting for me. I was fighting for others. It's like people were being picked on. I was a fighter I was 5 years old.
I can see that.
My brother fought with the Olympic boxing team.
Now I know who to call. I know who to call if things get sticky down here in Tennessee. Hey, call him Maggie. Okay, I'm sorry.
With all of that, what he did was he gave me opportunity that other people have, right? That's what privilege is. I was blessed, fortunate enough to come across the path of this man who cared enough to say, you got potential. What if we do this? Oh, you have a need? What if we fill both? And guess what? While you're at it, get some good grades. Those good grades got me to graduate from high school, got me to graduate from college, inspired me to say, maybe I can make it, and sometimes there's still a doubt because that little girl who suffered all those years, gang shootings, I was stabbed when I was 14, in a fight. But a lot of that was what comes back to, if I was able to overcome, and that's the story that I share. If I overcame that, this ain't,
You're right.
How we move forward.
The question I have for you, where's your book? I mean,
right.
Where's your book? I mean, so I would tell our viewers that we're going to put the link to your Samson interview in our podcast. We'll put that in the link on our social media so we can share with our listeners and our viewers. The thing I love about what you're saying is this. You had trauma-informed care, you had an incident. And for most, including myself, I don't know if I would have been that reflective, Because if you insulted me, I would have been so heavy on retribution that I would want you to go to jail, warrant, everything else. And here you are, and it's the difference. Because of your experiences, you knew help. You knew it wasn't the person that was doing that. So you wanted help for that person. And I just, when I think about transformation, we got to step outside of ourselves, because it's not about us. It's about the people we're supposed to serve. And you did that early on. And that whole notion of being more hopeful, giving dignity and respect, I think is outstanding. So I want to applaud you for all that you've done. And I want to applaud you for that, because I'm going to tell you what, if it was anybody else, the easiest road that person would take was jail or prison for assault of a probation and parole officer.
You know, my sister's a therapist, and you've met her. And she came to the hospital because they actually drove me to the hospital. He damaged my vertebrae. And she said, why don't you beat his ass? And I said, because I knew it wasn't him. I defended myself, but I didn't beat his ass, because that's not how we respond. You know, this kid was in complete psychotic fugue. And a lot of it had to do is because he wasn't getting the treatment that he so desperately needed. It's
that's compassionate leadership, and I want to applaud you. But here's the question: out of your 25 years of experience, being the first woman of color, what's been some of your obstacles and difficulties? And how do you?
Some of them, she got a laundry list of them.
But how do you overcome them? How do you overcome them and stay laser focused on the job at hand? Because one thing I know about you, that despite the obstacles, you are always laser focused on service and providing dignity and respect to your clients. So with all those obstacles, how do you stay focused?
You know, that's part of my healing. And how do I stay focused is I'm not going to say, that I'm, robotic, although my sister, we're both therapists. So we go to get certified to help people deal with trauma. She works she's the director of the hospital here, the social services, which works with forensics. She was pregnant at 16, her daughter we raised together. She's a nurse now. So we understand trauma. So a lot of what we talk about, she's like, you can't just ignore your feelings. I said, I'm not ignoring my feelings, but I know what I need to do, and I can't be bothered with that right now. And the best analogy that I can use is what I learned as, growing up with my dad. And like I said, my brother's sacrifice brought us out of the projects. That's what brought us here, right? So it's bobbing and weaving, nothing sticks. You can try to come at me, and you may hit me for a little bit, but I want to come back. And to me, it's important, because that's just how I was built. That's what my daddy taught me. That's what my mother taught me. We always talk about my dad was a little boy who was abandoned in Mexico. He sang in buses and shined shoes to eat. He knew how to survive. That's what he instilled in us, and he would always say, there's nothing in this world that you can't fix if it's not death. Beyond that, you can fix it, you can morph it, you can modify it. So you always have to learn to stand back up, and that's why he taught us what he taught us, and I think a lot of it, my dad's been gone for like 10, 11 years now. But a lot of when it gets tough, I think about what he would say when I would come home feeling a little, I don't know if I can do this. And his words, I hope you bleep this out. Fuck that. You're going to go back out there and you're going to show them what you're
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, facing challenges head on. I think oftentimes being a woman of color in a leadership position, like you said, you're gonna be met with several challenges, but it's your response to it, right? Yeah. And then let's be honest, like there has been, like you mentioned, like there has been mentors to pour into me that were people like white males. So it's not like every opposition that you face are going to be from a specific demographic or a specific gender. Those challenges come far and wide, and some of them will. So I don't know about you, Maggie, but I'm sure we probably had to say the same thing. Some of them surprise you how closely they come, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought, wait a minute, what happened to the code, right? Like some type of girl code or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and just having to navigate that. So you talk about that. You talk about self-restraint in the face of being a victim yourself. And we spoke about trauma-informed care, like Marcus. I mean, I come from a traditional law enforcement background. I started off in policing. So before I got into probation work, it was very black and white. Either you did it or you didn't. You put your hands on me, you see this badge, you see this uniform, you going to jail, right? And so for you to know, like, as tough as you are and as gritty as you are, and I love that about you, you knew and you put on almost like the social empathetic component to deal with this situation when you were in fact a victim. How do you think that others can adopt this mindset? Maybe if it's, you know, them being victimized or just in the totality of their organization, how can they adopt the trauma-informed mindset, trauma-informed care mindset for themselves, as well as implementation into an organization? And that kind of goes to more of your consultancy or whatnot. How do people adopt this whole philosophy that we know exists, but really is time to embrace?
You know, the universal assumptions of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we have universal precautions for communicable diseases and stuff like that. When working with justice involved individuals, and especially with people of color, especially, you know, poverty, white folks, Black folks, anybody who has lived below poverty guidelines has experienced a level of trauma. You know, when your basic needs haven't been met. So there's this the ACE study, right? Adverse childhood experience. That is something that for a lot of people, it doesn't know color, right? Because it's going to impact a child the same way. So a person who comes up in the world not having their basic needs met, who is experiencing addiction, mental health, mental illness in the family that can't be taken care of. You know, the ACE study is 10 questions, and it talks about people. Do you have somebody in your family who has been incarcerated? Do you have somebody who has a mental illness? Do you have, you know, stuff like that? I've had clients who check all the boxes. What we need to know is that if we want to make a difference in any setting, whether it be in law enforcement, whether it be in working with justice involved individuals in a community correction setting, as social workers, we have to assume that people have had experiences that led them to come across your desk or behind your squad car. And what can you do at that time to mitigate the impact of something that can go even worse? You know, we had one of the experiences that we had, it was one of the interviews that one of the law enforcement used, and they talked about how when responding to certain situations, especially with people who have been traumatized, you know, for a child who's been victimized as a child and now as an adult is experiencing the same maltreatment, and now by a position of authority, they're reduced back to that child who was mistreated, right? And they're going to respond in that way. So how we deal with those issues, assumptions of trauma, and doing interventions to mitigate and to be able to de-escalate a situation and say, look, sir, this is what we have to do. So something that we have in the training that we do is RISC, R-I-S-C. So that acronym stands for, what do people need who are justice involved? They need respect, they need information, they want safety and choice. Yes. That risk reduces risk, R-I-S-K, risk to receive it. Risk to become, you know, more violent, risk to reoffend, anything like that. So what we talk about, what do you mean? Well, treating people with respect, providing them information. The next step is we're going to have to, whether it be, I'm going to have to take your right arm and I'm going to put the handcuff. It's for your protection in mind. Just guiding people, you know, that if it's in community corrections, this is what happens. This is what you sign. These are the consequences. Not everything is expected to be done at the same time. And we can talk about, the next session that we talk about, I want you to read this. We're going to conduct an assessment that's going to give us an understanding of what are your needs? How can we support you being successful with this contract that you now have with the court? That's my role. You know, many times I think it's the re-identification, reclarification of the roles that community corrections plays. Probation, parole officers, we're not law enforcement. We are helping professions. We're agents of change, and the mindset needs to be changed, and it needs to start from the top. So part of that is not only changing who we are as individuals and how we see the world, but as criminal justice professionals, as what our expectations are. To me, what I tell our staff is when somebody goes to prison for a technical violation, that's our failure.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mm.
We have to be
Mm.
able to assess a situation. And you know, and I'm not saying that nobody belongs in prison, but I'm saying
Right, right.
somebody went to jail, somebody went to prison because of something that we failed to do, like the young man. He wasn't getting medication. He's a paranoid schizophrenic with a lot of trauma, you know, who was delusional and at that time psychotic. Who's at
Mhm.
fault here?
Right,
Right.
right.
So a
The
lot of
system
it
is at fault.
it's really
Yeah,
about,
The entire system is at fault. And you
the
said
entire system,
the
right? Not just
entire
the,
system
yeah,
is at fault.
yeah.
I mean, and so what you're talking about is this notion of compassion. And I don't care. I think the whole criminal justice system, from the front end to the back end, we lack giving people dignity and we lack compassion. And you can do your job whether you're a police officer, whether you're probation and parole, whether you're pretrial. You
of
can do
course.
your job and give compassion and respect and still do your job well. Now,
Yeah.
in your case that you're given, there's always red flags that occur. And we ignore the red flag because sometimes we want to jump to the arrest. And I
Oh
just
yeah.
think it's a terrible freaking mindset that we have. You know, we got to realize that trauma is real. And I love your definition of trauma. Therefore, if we want to fix this population, criminal justice can't do it by itself. I need behavioral health to step up. I mean, I'm just being real right now. I need behavioral health to
Yeah.
step up on the law enforcement side. I need behavioral health to step up in this education side. I need to step it up on the probation and parole side. And we have to work together, not siloed.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm happy to tell you that we've done, even after the pandemic, normally we would have to travel on site, but we're doing a lot of the Gain Center created now. We're doing the training through video conferencing. And we have a lot of communities, and we have a lot of communities in Texas that I'm very excited about. But I've been in communities where there's been law enforcement who have that mindset, who care about people. You know, I've had some very powerful stories of law enforcement who had that attitude about black and white. But what they came to realize after the workshop was that they were dealing with their unresolved grief and trauma, you know? And sometimes we mask it with doing what we do is not having feelings. So that's all part of human nature. And bringing it, you name it and you claim it. That's what I tell my son, name it and claim it. You know, we talk about, my son's biracial. So seeing all of this civil unrest and all of that, it really took a toll on him. And I told him, I said, what are you gonna do about it? You can sit here and be angry. You can sit here and be upset and, or it's unjust. What are you gonna do about it? In the long term, something not just
What's the action? Yeah.
You know, so he started looking at, I said, how is it that what you're pursuing? So he's doing computer science. So he introduced me to this book last night, you know, that he's an IT guy. My ex-husband was an IT guy. And what he was showing me is the first African-American woman who was a robotics expert. And she wrote a book about race, sex, and robotics, you know, and how even in robots, they can be designed to be, and I won't use the word racist, but not considered in the profile of people of non-whites.
Yes.
Fascinating. You know, when it comes down to cameras and facial recognition, it wasn't tested and normed with people of color with different features. So can it be distorted? Yeah. Can it lead to it having, you know, a different result as opposed to accuracy when it comes to Caucasian? Definitely. You know, so I think in every area of the world, not just in social justice, not just in criminal justice, but actually in the sciences, how many women of color are in STEM related occupations? You know, so that's how we can respond is, tell my son, what are you gonna do about it? I said, you can complain and write a letter, or you can say, I'm going to be focused, like you said, laser focus on how I can bring about change. And I said, this is something that's interested you since when President Obama, when they were working on the Affordable Care Act, you know, I remember I was working late. I was teaching a class at night. So he was like 10. he was taking notes for me, and he would tell me, well, this bill passed, this bill passed, and I told him this is something that's always important. And that's how we pass it on to our children. We pass on our passions to the people that we work with. And more importantly, I think we bring awareness as leaders in our community, in our organizations, bring awareness of how just treating people with dignity and respect results in safety for all.
Right. You're preaching right now. Okay. I was a Maggie fan before, but I appreciate this time because it makes me even more of a fan. And I mean, just the realistic part of it, I mean, how you are incorporating just naturally into your conversation, the balance that leaders have to have with balancing family and influencing the next generation and having these tough conversations. Again, this is not to isolate any one gender or one race or whatnot, but it is to elevate the conversation to say that people in certain subsets of community, whether it's socioeconomic disadvantage or minority or female, whatever, that certain people have different experiences, and a sense of awareness of that at all levels of government, at all levels of technology. It's important to have a sense of awareness. It's important to have policies and action behind it to make sure that we are trying to level the playing field as much as possible and make our staff, our line staff, our government officials aware of these conversations, of these things that are going on. So that way people can't say, I didn't know. Well, yeah, because we're telling you, right? Like, we're having these conversations and we don't want to be stuck there. So I'm just, I appreciate your time. You have been absolutely wonderful. I'm going to let Marcus get the last question, but I do have to ask a girl's question, right? Okay.
Oh.
So, I do. Because, women, we're trying to balance it all. We're trying to manage it all. How do you, I feel like women are the heartbeat of the household, right? You take us out, the dog may not get fed, the dishes may not get washed or whatever. Life will go on, but the heartbeat is something off. It's an irregular heartbeat. You remove the wife, even for a small period of time, or the woman of the household. So how do you, as the woman of your household, as a mom, as a former wife, I'm not sure if you're remarried now, but as a partner, right, as a sister, as a daughter, how do you manage all of the demands of being a woman in today's world with impacting your organization in the way that you do?
I'm what's considered the sandwich generation, which I think is true for a lot of women of color. We're taking care of our parents, we're taking care of our kids, and it depends on the role that you play in the family. When my dad died, de facto, I became the patriarch, if you will. I have two older brothers, but I guess I am my father's daughter. And a lot of what I've done is there a balance? Many times, unfortunately, Alicia, to answer that question is you sacrifice yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I end up, a lot of the research that I do is in the middle of the night. I was just having this conversation with my son yesterday. We were talking about the book, and I said, don't you remember, because he's working and he doesn't have to work, because that's why I bust my butt. But like I told him, it's important for you to work because you need to understand the value of hard work. And you go to school and you can do all of this. And I said, don't you remember when he was a little boy, that I would come, read his book, tuck him in, and then it was time to do my homework because I went back to school. So it was a lot of the stuff that we do is what we sacrificed, and we sacrifice ourselves in the sense of we don't find enough time for us to take care of us. But what we have to remember is that because we are the heartbeat, if we don't take care of ourselves, then what's going to give is us.
That's right.
Right.
And that's something that I've learned, and I'm more, right now I have I hope you bleep this out. I have the COVID-13, because I couldn't go to the gym. My mother's in the early stages of dementia. So I can't come home and say, okay, I'll be back. I'm going to the gym. So either I go to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning or come home and leave her again. So it's a balance. And, I have people saying, well, there's assistance for that. I said, in my culture, it's an honor.
It's an honor. That's
to
right.
be that person.
Wow.
Yeah. So if I have to make up my own exercise here, and so forth, right now when I get finished here, I am going to go run early because my son's, doesn't go into work till later on. So it's just a balance of that. And I think it's okay for us to have that outlet, to have other women who support us. That is the key. Because sometimes doing it alone, like you're talking about, sometimes we're like, wait a minute, I thought we were sisters. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's not there either. So it's important
Mhm.
to find a network that is supportive of who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
But more
Yeah.
importantly, I think that share the vision that we have to make our passion a better place.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can tell
I
you,
love that.
I can tell you
Love
that
that.
for a lot of people, it's just a case.
Mhm.
It's just a stat that drops off at the end of the month. For
Mhm.
me, I see the people, and I
Mhm.
think those are the arguments that we have, that for a lot of people, it's not so much how important it is to take care of people, but to manage caseloads. And there's a huge difference in that. To me, seeing the
Yeah.
impact that we see with the next generation. Was that something that I was listening
Mhm.
to? I'm sorry. I'm very passionate about this. Is our children
No,
who are
I love it.
poor, our children who are
Yeah.
poor, who are going to miss these whole year and a half, 2 semesters of school because they don't have internet.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mostly children of color, mostly
Mhm.
children who already are disadvantaged.
Mhm.
And that goes back to the equity and inclusion. There
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
equity in public schools. There has to be a way that somebody is going to step in and say, wait a minute, this is important. This is critical. We can do this.
Mhm.
But in order for
Mhm.
us to have that, there needs to be awareness that this is
Yeah.
happening. And I was seeing the research that, a lot of the children of color who aren't returning to online schools was because they didn't have reliable internet.
Mhm.
And that is something that's like, education changed my life. Had it not, and I was, how they have anchor babies. Well, they had anchor me, because had it not been for me going to college, I wouldn't have known how to even apply. And
Mhm.
then I got my sister who, like I said, look, we're living together and I don't mind supporting you, but you got to do something.
Yeah. You got to do something, girl. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get up out of here and do something. Yeah, no,
And she
I get
did.
that.
She went to
Said
school,
something.
she went to graduate school, and she is also a social justice advocate. She is a great therapist, and that's what she does. She advocates for people. She does the forensics and oversees that whole clinic to restore somebody to competency so they can assist in their defense.
Mhm.
Because many times people end up in justice involved because of them not being stable on the medications, again,
Mhm.
that they're the care that they lack, inadequate
Mhm.
care. So when it
Yeah.
comes
Let me
to
say this real quick,
equity
man.
and
I don't want to
inclusion,
cut you
I
off,
think
but I
in
gotta tell
every
you this.
when it comes to
Yeah.
healthcare, when it comes, I was reading this article. It was a journal. It talked about how, what was that?
I said no. I said I'm laughing because you said something that I got to I want to talk about, and because I don't want to
Yeah.
miss this point. We talk
Okay.
about equity and inclusion,
Uh-huh.
but you said something else: equity, inclusion, and access.
Yeah.
And you talked about it from
In access, yes.
their access.
Yeah.
So my point, you used the example of the internet and kids and school.
Oh yeah.
Right? And we always talk about awareness with that piece.
Uh-huh.
If we're aware, what are we going to do about it? And there's been places all over the country when people were made aware that that internet was available to all when they became aware. But what I want to circle back to, as a leader of your organization, how do you ensure equity and inclusion, not only for your staff, but for
Mhm.
your clients? How do you do that?
Well, the first thing that I did when it came down to, in order for us to even bring down the importance of equity and inclusion, we have to bring awareness. So what I did is, being a certified trauma-informed care uh, practitioner, is I literally personally trained my entire staff, and it's in groups of 30, to get them certified, to understand the importance of understanding the justice involved individuals that we work with, and how trauma informed care is universal, and how at every level it can impact not only how successful we are, but more importantly, ensuring the safety and the success of the clients that we serve. So when it comes down to understanding equity and inclusion, is we have to be able to make it to where they understand how not having it compromises the success of somebody. You know, if we don't have equal access to education in this case, then the likelihood of somebody not completing school, the likelihood of somebody engaging in behavior that leads them to become just as involved is higher, right?
Yes.
So it starts with something as simple as that. So they're not educated, they can't get a good job. Many times we result in finding other activities that are going to help us pay the bills. So it starts as simple as the even start, you know, but when they come to the profession is making sure that everybody has the same opportunities.
That's right.
That privilege is not something that's going to run, especially in a public institution, that everybody should have an opportunity to apply. So we changed a lot of the policies, and you were a part of it, Marcus, when you were here, is we changed a lot of the policies that really promoted growth, that really supported what we expect from our staff to be able to be well-rounded individuals, professionals that are going to really be the leaders in the field that they're in working with our clients. You know, and part of that is, and I don't want to say just competency as far as skills, but competency in understanding who you're working with. Because, you know, like Alicia said earlier, sometimes we think that people are allies when it could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be color, because here 90% is people of color. So it's a class issue. So there's so many different issues and layers about people that when we come to looking at how we see ourselves, we don't want to be associated with a certain population. So we seem to be harder on them. You know, it's something that happens a lot. And something that the paper that I was telling you, you know, I was reading, it was the fundamental cause theory. And that talked about how crime and disease are both significant social problems, and with social, psychological, and biological causes. So if you look at like the ACE study, it talks about, right, the lack of basic needs and how that can result in developing disease and developing self-defeating behaviors, drugs and alcohol, and how that resulted in early death, as opposed to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the tip of that pyramid is self-actualization. You know, people who have achieved that, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, people who've lived their lives the way they believe to be in, like Gandhi said, to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And those individuals have achieved that. But how do you get that?
That's a tweetable. Tweet that. Tweet that.
You know, these causes. So in going back to the fundamental cause theory, it talks about how crime and disease are both significant social problems. And at the same time, you know how we have risk, need, responsivity, that at all levels of causation, risk factors that predict criminal behavior also predict disease. So if we are, Texas is not a Medicaid expansion state. So we have a lot of children who don't have preventive care. We have a lot of women who don't have prenatal care. You know, we have a lot of people who don't have care, and the best care that they get is in a crisis situation. So they find other methods to address their pain, to address their disease, to address their mental health state. Because they don't have access. Many times what leads to criminal behavior. It's part of, you know, the fight, flight, or freeze. What am I going to do? I got to take care of myself.
It's like the natural, it's just the natural inclination. Like I have to take care of self, right? And then sometimes I think too, as you see your point, that oftentimes, you know, practitioners miss those cues to say, oh, this was a basic need that wasn't being met, and this is the way that person knew to respond to it. Again, not blaming the practitioner, but I think sometimes it is lack of awareness, lack of training, lack of, you know, is several layers on both sides. So, man, thank you for that. You know, of course, you know, I've seen your work through APPA. We've worked together on different projects here and there. I think the world of you, Maggie. I love the work that you're doing. I think you are a dynamic leader. We are fortunate to have you, you know, in the world of probation and parole. So we thank you for sharing with us. Marcus, I'm gonna kick it over to you, and then we can let Maggie have last last comments, if you will.
I just want to echo what you said. I really enjoyed. I've known you for years, and I've always loved your passion.
Yeah.
And every time I speak to you, you reignite my passion.
She does, doesn't she? I'm like, I want to run out here and do something.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do something today.
My passion, and it make me. Yeah. And you and I always agree because we've debated about a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
But I think as practitioners, it's okay to debate and okay to discuss when you put the clients first, because there's many different ways to get to that outcome. And I enjoyed your conversations. I enjoy your leadership. You are doing great work in El Paso, Texas. And I want our viewers, listeners, just to know who you are, what you represent, and we're both thankful for that. So you get to close out with anything you want to say, but we really appreciate you and appreciate this time that we spent with us.
Well, first of all, Marcus, Alicia, I appreciate you even considering me. You know, I think being humble is a big part of doing the work that we do. That we can never believe that we know everything. And it's people like you who are in the fight, who are in the struggle, who understand what it's like, who know that we need a platform. And there's people who come around, like I said, like that counselor. You know, there was another woman who came and did courageous conversations about race. And she gave examples about people expect people to pick up themselves from their bootstraps. What if they don't have boots? And I said, you know what? That's exactly correct. So I think continuing to learn, the lifelong learner in us is about not only what we know, it's about continuing to grow and seeing other people's perspective. So, and you know, like I'll watch the other news and my son's like, I don't understand why you watch that. You know, it's upsetting to hear people rationalize how discrimination and so forth. And I said, because you always have to know how somebody can believe something. Right? So you have to understand their narrative to be able to conclude and say, yo, no, I'm in the right place, you know, because they believe just as much as I believe about social justice, they believe to be punitive, and they believe that it's okay to discount a whole marginalized community for their greater good. You know, and I'll end with this. So I was listening to the Barack Obama podcast, and he was talking about Reagan. What I remember about Reagan, we were still in the projects in East LA. And I remember, I didn't know politics. And I was a little girl. And I remember what Reagan did is he took away our dessert. And I'm thinking, how come we don't have dessert anymore? We had free lunch, right? That's where we ate our best meal, because our parents would work these long hours in the factory and so forth. So, well, that's Reaganomics. That was the first, and every time I would associate it with that. So again, we no longer they didn't want big government, but what does that mean? There's not a lot of service. So if there's not taxes, there's not public service. So little kids who start off already disenfranchised and marginalized, and you have people who thinking, well, to each his own, it's never going to get out of that. And you find ways to get out, you know, but sometimes engaging in behaviors that lead people to become just as involved. So I do believe that as a society, we have to develop a sense of equity and inclusion when it comes to colleges, when it comes to vocation, when it comes to health disparities, when it comes to providing services to individuals that are going to help them be in a playing field. And I'm not saying just about wealth, you know, material stuff. I'm talking about opportunity. Opportunity to be able to do what we've done, you know, to be able to get to the next level. So with that, I close, and I appreciate you. And I am a fan, Ms. James. Whatever it is that I know that you and I, as women of color, have experienced, I think we have some of that experience to share to other generations that are coming back, because it gets scary sometimes. You know, sometimes you have to step back and say, okay, how do I handle this? If I come across this wrong, I'm just going to be dismissed as the angry, you know what, right? Or she's always defensive, or everybody else can be losing their mind. But the minute you say something, it's, you know, so do I want to be dismissed and the message just go, or do I want to check myself to make sure that the message is heard and conveyed? I don't want to say that I'm selling out, but sometimes you just got to change how you approach things just to get to the table. And it's just
if it's lost in translation, then it's completely lost, right? And so actually, Marcus and I, we had like a heated debate about this like last week. I'm gonna call you out there. So we had like a heated debate because Marcus feels like being authentically you at any point, at any time, woman, man, color, not color, is important for this day and age. And I said, it is, Marcus, but I'm gonna tell you, as a woman of color, I feel like sometimes if you come across too strong and too angry, your message can be dismissed, people shut down, and it doesn't resonate. And so it's an art that you have to develop to be able, and it is not, I think it is maybe perhaps, I don't think it is maybe all of the time like intended, the other person intends to shut, the person down, but maybe it's cultural differences. I'm not really sure what it is, but I feel like there is so much truth in that. And that we have to continue as women, right? Because women, white women, black women, whatever, Latina women, like we have all experienced that, like being manned, our comment said, and then it's kind of like pushed aside, and a man says it, and it's like, whoa, right? And it's not, again, it's not to male bash, but it's just saying that to have some sense of awareness that this happens, and we need to, make sure that we're mindful of it, and so that it doesn't continue to happen, because we understand that the more diverse voices you have at the table, male, females coming together, I mean, how powerful is that to have a unified, very well represented, diverse population? So thank you for saying that.
What did I say? So let me defend myself on this one. Great debate. I want us
to say it regardless.
Yeah, I'm all about transformation, no matter what. And everything you say is right on. It irritates me. It irritates me greatly that when we have people in the room, and just like that, when a woman says something, people don't listen or they devalue it. I call that crap out. We are in 2021. And we're all trying to transform a system. I need every voice, regardless of race, sex, any damn thing. And if people are still holding back to that 1970, 80 mentality, and we don't call them out, shame on us. I think everybody needs to be authentic in their voice. We don't have to always agree, but we are going to be respectful, because everyone has a voice and we should listen. And we need to call it out when it's not done that way.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. We have to.
That's my drop the mic.
I agree with Alicia in the sense of, as women, as strong women, because you have to be strong. You have to be thick-skinned to be able to speak your voice and speak your truth. But sometimes to be at the table, to even get a seat at the table, to be relevant and to bring about change, you sometimes have to just, be stealth about it. I'll give you an example. Not that I'm comparing myself to Kamala Harris or anything, but in that debate, what did she do? She had to be smiling and responding, or else they would have dismissed her like they've done before, And a lot of it is that she was very careful in how she responded to questions, but she did a lot more smiling. I don't know if you remember, you need to watch that.
I did watch it. I remember the fly in the debate. Yeah, I remember that was the start of the show.
No. I kind of want to like.
A lot of it was is that as women, and if you read a lot of the narratives, is like if women of color, the minute that you start speaking with authority or have a position and a stance, or you're just angry, or you came to the meeting, what you have to say is dismissed. So you have to be able to deliver the message in a way that it's going to be accepted. Sometimes I go off the reservoir. I completely go in. This is what it is, and that's it. I'm not stepping back, because this is how important it is. But I know that with other colleagues, other men of color, it's like, just kind of tone it down a little bit, because they're already expecting you to come out swinging. Okay. And that's good, and that's good, because even within the code, it is, and sometimes I said, look, I really tried. And I told Marcus before, I tried to behave, and I did, but there's just times where you just can't.
You got to be yourself. And
you have to be yourself, but at the same time.
To kill this narrative, I mean, I got what you were going with the story, but to kill this narrative, we have to call it out. And I don't care where I get the idea from. I don't care who came from. I listen to all, and I model that all the time. And if someone ever says, well, why are you listening to her? and doesn't align with my values, I'm gonna light them up. And that's what we should do, because I need to change.
If that was the standard across the board, if that mindset was a standard across the board, and that's what we're working towards. And let's keep it real, like Maggie said, I mean, I have worked with male white men to say, yes, Alicia, go. Be passionate. But I think what we're saying is that in a totality, and it's just not individualized experiences, but when women come together and women share, we talk about challenges that we have to navigate, and that's part of it. And some of it is self-experience that we've experienced, and some of it is experience that we know that exists. So we appreciate your mindset, Marcus, and we will continue to throw our ideas at you because we need allies. We need male allies. We need allies to be able to help broaden the conversation. So absolutely. Give a shout out to the guy. We're not male bashing here.
No,
We're not.
Both of you are courageous, outstanding leaders whose voice needs to be in this system. And I don't care if people are going to listen or not. Your voice is extremely important for this transformation. And both of you have done outstanding work and will continue to do outstanding work. And I measure people this way. And I'll say this. I don't care who you are. I measure people if I can work for you. And when I say, can I work for you? I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your sex. If your values line up with the way you speak, are you consistent? And both of you are passionate and consistent in values. I could work I work for Alicia now, but I could work for you, Maggie.
Lies.
Thank you both. Have a wonderful Saturday.
Thank you.
And if ever I can be of service, please don't hesitate to call. This is, like I said, this is my passion. This is my life's work. And I think the more awareness that we bring, there's a lot of people who feel like us, and sometimes they just don't know where they fit in because it's not something that's taught. I was reading this Simon Sinek, I think that's his name, that says, don't hire people because of skill, because skill can be taught. Hire people because of their passion. And that's the truth.
Passion. That's right.
That's the truth.
You can't put a price tag on passion. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Maggie.
Thanks, Maggie.
I know, hashtag that. You can't put a price tag on passion, honey. The tweetable.
And there has to be courage along with that, because you can have passion.
Has to be courage.
Like you stand because you're afraid of the ramifications. Sometimes we just have to take the hits. But if you
absolutely,
then
Yeah, bobbing and weaving. I like that. Like your dad, bobbing and weaving. I'm here for it. All right. Well, thank you, Maggie.
You all have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Yes, you too. You too. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.